longtime Guantanamo Bay detainees have been transferred out of the detention facility and to Saudi Arabia in what is being described as a ray of hope for the facility's eventual closure. According to Guantanamo Review Task Force assessments from 2009 leaked by WikiLeaks to the New York Times, Syed Mohammed Hassan Qatari was captured in Pakistan back in 2001 and was considered at high risk for re-engaging with al-Qaeda. Meanwhile, Hamoud Abdullah Hamoud was captured in Karachi, Pakistan in 2002. His official files describe Hamoud as a member of the Osama bin Laden 55th Arab Brigade who took part in the attack on Bagram Air Force Base. He was described as a high risk to U.S. interests with a medium intelligence value. To talk more about the transfer of these men and what it means in terms of long-term plans for Guantanamo Bay, I'm joined now by Michael Ratner, President Emeritus at the Center for Constitutional Rights. Michael, thank you so much for joining me. Talk about the timing of the release of these two men. Why now, when one of these men was recommended, as I understand it, to be released years ago?
Well, you know, we've had 80 people who've been recommended for release years ago. And it's taken 5 years since Obama promised to close the place to start getting some people released. It is, as you said, a ray of hope. Why now? I think a couple of things. One is I think the hunger strikes that took place in May or a few months ago put this issue back on the front page. That's number one. Number two, I think it is still a huge issue in the Muslim world that we are keeping 180 people, or 160 people rather, who have never been charged with crimes at Guantanamo. So I think they may making an effort to close it. But Obama has had clay feet about it. We'll have to see whether these two, plus 2 people recently sent to Algeria against their will, and I think 2 more people that are going out today to Sudan, will make a difference. We'll be down to 158. Will they actually get it closed? I still think it's very unlikely in this administration. You have to remember, half of those people have not been cleared for release. They haven't been charged with anything, but they haven't been cleared for release. Do
we have any indication at this point why the Guantanamo Bay officials chose these 2 men for release, as well as the other 4 that you had mentioned previously?
You know, I think they're trying to figure out what countries they believe they can get assurances that the people sent back won't be tortured. They claim to have that from Algeria. We at the center, who had one of those Algerian clients, Meziane, think that's wrong, that he is in danger in Algeria, but they went ahead anyway, I think because of the pressure on them to try and get them closed. I don't think there's any particular order. I think it's when they can get agreements with countries and get people out. But they certainly have not worked very hard on it. As we sit here, we're coming up on January 11th to the 12th anniversary. Some of these men have been there 11 and almost 12 years. So that just shows me that they're not working very hard. And recently, a couple of days ago, the general who actually was responsible for setting up Guantanamo, General Lenhart, came out with a statement saying it was the wrong thing to do to set it up to begin with. We didn't learn anything from the interrogations. It has to be closed immediately, and it's unconstitutional to keep people at Guantanamo without any charges and without any convictions. Yet that's what, I'm afraid to say, that part of my country has become.
Do you know what will happen to these men next after they are transferred away from Guantanamo Bay? Are they still in prison somewhere else, or do they walk as free men?
Well, certainly with regard to the 2 Algerians, they were put into incommunicado detention in Algeria immediately. We've been trying to put huge amount of pressure on Algeria. We have petition campaigns, demonstrations, so that they won't do anything to these men. The experience in 2010 of a man who was sent back to Algeria did not go well. He got a very long sentence, really for not doing anything that you and I would consider criminal, except really opposing the Algerian government by having left it. So we are worried. I mean, obviously, we have to keep track of the people in Saudi Arabia who were sent back, and each of them, because you never know what's going to happen to them. Hopefully, this administration will be more able to look at that than they have in the past and will be more concerned by it, because one bad example will put this program to an end. But one thing that's shocking to me is that Obama tomorrow could close a good half of that camp despite the restrictions that are there in Congress. Yemen in particular, there's 80-some people from Yemen sitting in Guantanamo. 55 of those have been cleared for release. Yemen has been taken off the list of countries where you can no longer send people. Tomorrow, Obama could transfer those 55. When we start getting some mass transfers like that, I'll begin to have some hope that this ray of hope will go into real sunshine for the people at Guantanamo.
Now, piggybacking off of what you were just talking about, let's talk in a little bit more detail about one of the major issues that has been slowing this process down significantly, and that is the transfer of these men to other countries. Now, the new National Defense Authorization Act seems to have some language in it that allows for compromise on flexibility in transferring these men out of Cuba. What do you know about that?
Well, you know, the last National Defense Authorization Act, which is still in effect, was permissible enough to allow these 6 people to be transferred, the 2 to Algeria, 2 to Saudi Arabia, and 2 to Sudan. What that shows me is that those, quote, restrictions could have been complied with by Obama all along, but he didn't. The new NDAA, which will be voted on next week, gives him a little more room to make the certifications that the people won't be dangerous or recidivist, et cetera. But he's always had that room. But hopefully it will be somewhat of a green light, if not a big green light, for him to say, I now may have the courage, because maybe Congress is not as strong against it, to get these people out of Guantanamo. But it's something the president should have done a long time ago that I put really right at his feet.
And finally, we have just a short amount of time left, but we have had guests here on RT before who have said that even if Guantanamo Bay does eventually close for good, the idea of Guantanamo Bay or indefinite detention will not. What do you think about that?
You know, this country has changed permanently since 9/11. The idea that we can indefinitely detain people, that we didn't prosecute anybody for torture, that you don't have to try people when you pick them up, I'm afraid that is now embedded in the American legal system. And so what I fear is that you can close Guantanamo physically, but you will not end the illegal detentions that are currently going on in places like Bagram and may go on in other places as well. So I think it's very bad going forward, even if it's closed physically, but closing it physically would certainly be an important step, particularly for the men at Guantanamo.
Michael Ratner, President Emeritus at the Center for Constitutional Rights, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.